Every decision you make is a gamble. Whether it's something as simple as your DoorDash order or something as harrowing as walking to your apartment complex's trash bin during peak human hours, many commitments you make lead to an unknowable outcome. Now imagine a world where you could make money off of all of those tiny decisions, a world where you could bet on the outcome of almost anything. This is the world we're living in today, and it's gotten so bad that putting Epidemic in the title might finally be justified. It's time to talk about how this started, why the current economic model incentivizes businesses like this, the lasting damages it has on young people and their relationships, and what we can do to stop this from getting worse. Several months ago, I made a video on the underage gambling epidemic. In that video, I underlined the addictive nature of gambling and how companies exploit the naivety of children to get them hooked on it for life. To best explain how this works from a different angle, because it's going to be important for the broader context of this video, I want to highlight an example of the Coke versus Pepsi war that was used in a recent Struthless video, which is, by the way, fantastic. Back in the day when Coke and Pepsi were at war fighting over their market share, they found something interesting through their research. When observing the behavior of Coke and Pepsi fans, they realized that if a child chose Coke early on in their life, they would stick with Coke basically forever, and the same was true of Pepsi. So these companies pivoted a good portion of their marketing towards children because it had the highest long-term ROI. In other words, if you can get a child attached, they will likely stay attached into their adult years unless some greater outside force influences them. This is exactly what's been happening with video game loot boxes and sports gambling. Many of these products and advertisements are aimed at children, though they might try to hide that, because these big corporations know that if they can get them hooked early, they could have a lifetime customer. So what would happen if we applied that same line of thinking to something teenagers can use to gamble on almost anything due to a legal loophole? Enter the world of prediction market betting. Imagine an 18-year-old is walking down the streets of New York and they see a sign with Mamdani and Cuomo's face on it, the two previous candidates for governor of New York. Both have a percentage under them displaying the likelihood that they'll win. It looks like more of a poll than anything. But after further investigation, the 18-year-old finds out that they can bet on this prediction using an app called Kalshi. Kalshi is just one of the latest developments in a several-decade-long history of trying to financialize every and any interaction. On Kalshi, you can trade contracts on future real-world events, buying yes or no shares on outcomes in categories like sports, politics, weather, economy, and culture. It functions like a regulated exchange where you profit if your prediction about an event is correct, essentially betting on the future in a compliant way. We'll come back to that word compliant in a sec here. Some of the events you can bet on at the time of recording this video include: what will the announcers say during the Philadelphia at Washington pro football game? Will measles cases reach above 2,050 this year? And perhaps a more meta bet, will Bitcoin cross 100K again this year? Kalshi CEO Tarek Mansour has laid out their mission goal plain and simple on national television.
The long-term vision is to financialize everything and create a tradable asset out of any difference in opinion.
Wow, that sounds dystopian, but to VCs it sounds like heaven. Kalshi recently secured $1 billion in a Series E round at an $11 billion valuation, so it's clear they're going to try to push for the idea of prediction markets heavily in the future too. And here's the really insidious part. Kalshi is available to anyone over the age of 18 in any state, even the states that have banned gambling. Why? Because they've found a way to not label themselves as gambling. Kalshi classifies its markets as event-based futures contracts, so instead of betting against the house, like in sports gambling, users are technically trading contracts and betting with each other on whether a real-world event will occur, which is much closer, legally speaking, to buying a commodity future than placing a bet. Each contract settles at $1 if the event happens and $0 if it doesn't, which allows Kalshi to argue that users are engaging in price discovery instead of games of chance. And it's this distinction that gives them their shield of regulation. Kalshi is approved and overseen by the Commodities Future Trading Commission, or CFTC for short, and because the CFTC regulates derivatives markets, Kalshi falls under federal financial law rather than state gambling law. That federal status lets it operate nationwide, bypassing the patchwork of state-level gambling regulations, including many of the safeguards meant to protect teenagers. In other words, they reframe bets as regulated financial trades, or in other words, it's still gambling. I don't care how many semantic hula hoops you jump through. The fact of the matter is, people are still betting on things, even if there isn't a formal definition of a house. But, of course, there is technically still a house because Kalshi gets a portion of each trade. In fact, the majority of activity on Kalshi is sports betting, the same thing platforms labeled as gambling allow you to do, and they themselves have even advertised their platform as legal sports betting. A funny development of this is that the American Gaming Association, the national trade group for the casino industry, put out a statement calling for prediction markets to only be allowed through state-licensed sportsbooks. Of course, we all know what that really means. We don't give a shit about the ethics behind this. We just want to stop losing our market share to prediction markets.
Like, here's some AGA research that supposedly shows that 85% of Americans say these contracts are gambling, not financial instruments. 84% say they should only be available through state-licensed sportsbooks, clearly arguing their point. And then if you go to Kalshi's website, they have their own propaganda survey. Quote, nationwide poll shows broad support for prediction markets. 9 in 10 voters say Americans should have access to prediction markets, viewing them as financial instruments, not gambling. Well, gee, guys, which is it? Can we figure it out?
The negative consequences of a system like this should be obvious to most people. Placing a bet on what can happen in the future and the rush involved when potentially winning money induces certain chemicals in the brain that attach to that experience, constantly wanting more of it. And if you allow people to bet on anyone and anything, it only gives them an excuse to feed their addiction even more. But what's even worse about prediction market sites like Kalshi or Polymarket is how they incentivize insider trading. Imagine a mid-level political staffer who knows days in advance that a candidate is about to drop out of a race. That information is illegal to trade on in the stock market and is useless at a sportsbook unless odds are explicitly offered. But on a prediction market, it becomes a clean, low-risk opportunity. This is what makes prediction markets uniquely dangerous. Unlike traditional gambling, where outcomes are uncertain, or stocks where insider trading is heavily surveyed, supposedly, these platforms thrive on asymmetric information. The entire purpose of prediction markets is to make predictions, and the most accurate predictions come from insiders. In fact, there's already been stories like this leaked, particularly one about an insider who allegedly made over $1 million in a day using an early Google data leak. And what is the response from the people in charge of these companies? They see it as a good thing.
If your goal is to actually, for the 99% of people trying to get signal about what's going to happen in the world, like is the Suez Canal going to be reopened or whatever, you actually want insider trading. You want, some admiral sitting on a ship in the Suez Canal who has really good information to be trading, so you get better, higher quality signal out of them, right?
But predictive markets do rely on someone having some inside information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that people going and having an edge to the market is a good thing. Obviously, you need to curate them and you need to be really clear and stringent on where the line is drawn and like sort of ethics, and we spend a lot of time on that, but it's sort of an inevitability that this will happen and there's a lot of benefits from it, and people will adapt.
I wish I could tell you that the gamblification of everything stops there, that being able to bet on any event is where big tech draws the line. But I've just become aware of something even worse: being able to gamble on your credit card balance. Covered is an app launching in Q1 of 2026 that allows you to play games to win your money back on credit card purchases. Take a look at the way they're advertising this.
Taco Tuesday wasn't supposed to hit that hard. Damn. Cervezas, churros, the round for the cube table. Hey. Then Covered picked up the tab and made it all worth it, giving those spur-of-the-moment buys a second shot and turning them into surprise wins. It's those little splurges, like that new shirt you swooped on the latest drop. They all pile up on your card, and now your statements are due next week. What if one of those charges, or all of it, just got picked up?
This is the most streamlined equivalent of making a huge purchase for the sole purpose of immediately trying to win that money back by betting on red in a casino. Except instead of having to get access to an actual casino, you can simply just pull a slot machine on your phone and get fed all that lovely dopamine in the form of chance, bright colors, and confetti. I especially love this article online I found because of how it paints the app. Innovative app Covered helps users take control of debt, one win at a time. It's a carefully engineered attempt to rewire the way people think about money, starting with the $1.1 trillion in credit card debt currently weighing down American households. We didn't just want to build another budgeting app, says Zhu, one of the founders. We wanted to reframe the experience of getting out of debt to make it feel like progress, not sacrifice. Apart from the fact that this article was clearly written by AI, that is an absolutely absurd way to frame getting into more debt through gaming. Do you really think these fintech bros who made the app are trying to help you escape debt, or just push you farther into it? Because if the app actually did what it claims, it wouldn't be profitable. It all circles back to what companies have known for decades now. Find a way to make the addictive thing appealing to teenagers, and you have a customer for life. The ethics are treated as an afterthought. So our modern world has turned into one big playground for companies to take advantage of people's inclination, both young and old, to turn to things like gambling when facing financial pressures. They've communicated their intentions loud and clear. The question is, what can we do about it? On an individual level, we really need to start making a cultural push towards gambling being labeled as lame. You might feel that's already the case because in your social circles, you just see the fact that things are getting gamblified as companies just trying to squeeze every last drop out of us, but you'd be surprised how socially accepted gambling and especially sports betting is to the youth. Continue spreading information about the evil predatory practices of these companies and make gambling seem like you're just getting on your knees for VCs and fintech bros. Using a gambling site should be seen as a loser mentality, and if someone you know is deep into it, you gotta influence them to get out in any way you can. Try to frame it in some way that makes them feel outrageously lame for doing it. Now, on a federal level, regulations that would help minimize the damage of these platforms has been both slow and deemed unimportant, especially under our current administration. An article from ESPN outlines this. The commission canceled a public roundtable on prediction markets in April and has not rescheduled it. President Donald Trump's nominee to lead the commission, Brian Quintenz, sits on the Kalshi board and owns stock in the company. Quintenz, who served as CFTC commissioner during Trump's first term, is waiting to be confirmed by the Senate. Quintenz has said he will resign from the Kalshi board and divest his stock if confirmed. The CFTC did not return a request for comment. Besides journalism and other forms of raising awareness, the only thing you can really do is force state-level consumer protection offices to investigate these platforms and reopen doors that federal agencies have left closed. And that requires you to fill formal complaints to your state attorney general. But honestly, until our current economic system no longer incentivizes big corporations to create these gamblified gray loopholes that offer teens and adults a way to get addicted to losing hundreds of thousands of dollars, they're gonna continue adapting and finding new ways to exploit us. As for how we go about creating that economic change, that's a topic for another video. Would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, you'll probably enjoy my underage gambling epidemic video that goes into more of the addiction aspect and all the ways that sports betting and loot boxes and games get these young kids, so check that out if you want, and I'm going.